Wilson, London, Burks, Williams, Olave, are any of these guys overly sensitive to draft slot? Is there any member of that five where you feel like we need the NFL seal of approval and or an elite QB? But any of them, the guys who go early, right, are going to have that additional bump, because really we see the first round as sort of multiple sections, to where think of people as first round picks, second round picks. Obviously, first round pick is better, but top 10 pick is much better than that. If you get a couple of those guys in the top 10, top 15, then their floor is so high in terms of both what the NFL thinks about them, what their team has to do with them. But some of these guys who come in the second half are probably going to hit the elite quarterbacks, a much better initial situation. Anybody that you think needs the perfect fit in order to be a legitimate first round, or if you're looking at non-super flex, a legitimate top 6 pick in rookie drafts?
So you spun it the way I was going to, and that if you have the 101 and 102, I think it basically is Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker in whichever order you want. I have Hall over Walker. If it changes, not egregious. If only because, well, I think a lot of these receivers are good, and we all have our tiers and ranking them accordingly. One, it doesn't seem like any of us have the same rankings. That's an issue. And two, like, I wonder, since just like the quarterbacks, they have enough blemishes to where maybe it's a good, not great group all the way around. So much so that I'm predicting right now, what I'm seeing in a lot of mocks as well, 6 to 8 wide receivers in the first round off the board, and they are consistently changing from the number 4 pick on across teams. I actually call the next part of your question, I call it the Rashad Bateman theory, since we went to last year's draft, although we love Bateman, knowing that whomever the Ravens landed, that was basically going to be our sacrificial lamb for redraft leagues. And unfortunately, it happened to be our boy Rashad Bateman. This year, I think the sacrificial lamb is whoever plays with Zach Wilson with the Jets. Just because there are not just one, but multiple hills to climb, since they would have to overcome inaccuracy and hope Wilson develops first off. And I think he will, but there's still a big hill to climb. And then likely earn or play a lesser role behind Elijah Moore, Braxton Berrios, who they just re-upped in place of Jameson Crowder. Berrios also averaged 7.9 targets per game in the contest he played without Crowder last year, and Corey Davis, who's still on the big money contract. Right now, the Jets are actually consistently mocked to select either Drake London or Garrett Wilson at number 4 or number 10. And both of those fits, in my opinion, are even a concern schematically. Wilson had success both as a slot receiver in 2020, and then he moved primarily to the boundary last year, but it's still reasonably raw and would presumably get pigeonholed into the slot at 183 as a raw talent. And Drake London, while I think he's awesome, physically dominant at 6'4", 219, still did have 8 drops on 96 catchable targets last year before breaking his ankle, and would likely have to earn his production in the league as an outside player if he gets drafted to the Jets, catching via contested targets on coin flips downfield from Zach Wilson. It won't happen since he's not being taken seriously in that top 10 range. But I actually think Treylon Burks and the Mickey Mouse usage he received in college, I don't think he's a Mickey Mouse player, but the way he was used, the fact he was second in the nation with 12.2 yards per catch on screens last year, 25% of the targets actually came on screens last season as well, and he played 77% of his career snaps from the slot, despite being 6'2", 225. I think that kind of usage, like a la Rondale Moore, would be very interesting and the kind of fit the Jets need if they use him as such. But if Treylon Burks comes into the league and is asked to only win on the boundary, I'm not saying he can't. It's just a questionable product since he only played 9 coverage snaps against man coverage last year, against press coverage. So we really don't know. We assume he can at 6'2", 225. We really don't know, though, if he can get free. So I just think there are a lot of question marks, honestly, among all the wide receivers, which is why I keep going back to Hall and Walker at 101, 102.
Do you feel, though, in terms of overall depth of a first round, do you think this year is, as strong as in recent memory, or do you still think there's a huge amount of stumbling blocks in this particular draft?
Unfortunately, I don't think it's strong. I think if you're in the need for a wide receiver, you're going to get it. Draft capital will play its part I think team fit's going to be more important than ever. We usually think it's important, but definitely more important than ever, especially since there is some wide open opportunity here. If someone goes to the Cardinals, perhaps he can outplay Antoine Wesley. I say perhaps. He'll probably outplay Antoine Wesley. It's just a matter of if Cliff Kingsbury will allow that, since remember, like Kingsbury threw Wesley out there in place of AJ Green full-time, in place of DeAndre Hopkins full-time, because he recruited Wesley to Texas Tech. Like, that's his friend. And so if a receiver in the back end of the first round can outplay Antoine Wesley, we'll see if he can actually earn that role. But more importantly, the Chiefs and Packers have wide open roles. And so I'm sort of looking to who lands there and taking those chances. If you're doing super flex drafts or rookie drafts post the NFL draft, that's when we're really going to know how ADPs fluctuate. But doing it before the draft, it's risky, but you don't mind taking your shot on that 6 to 8 wide receiver range in the back, because it could actually prove to be profitable, and that someone could end up at number 4, number 10 overall pick, surprisingly. Number 8 to the Falcons as well. Like Shawn mentioned, he likes that spot with Mariota. There's a wide open position there.
The thing with the wide receivers that you mentioned that is so interesting is that you pull up 5 different mock drafts and you're going to see them in very different orders. You mentioned Burks not being mocked as high again right before the combine. He had risen up to being the top wide receiver in a lot of the mocks. Mildly disappointed. I think that's a little bit overblown based on what he's demonstrated and what a player of his size needs to do. But it's interesting to see London, even in the top 10. It's interesting to see Wilson pretty consistently in the top 15, but occasionally falling out. Olave, somebody who probably doesn't have the chance to go in the top 15, but if receivers fall, you see him even as the top wide receiver every once in a while. And then Jamison Williams, somebody who I think at this point, you look at where he's mocked with the injury, it seems pretty clear he would have been the number 1 if he hadn't suffered that injury. But to see all those guys mixed around, I think with that and with the potential need for the landing spots for both the running backs and the quarterbacks even more than in most drafts makes this so fun in terms of the first round. But then we also have this next wave of players, and the second round is going to be very, very interesting in terms of rookie drafts, say day 2 in the NFL draft. Among the next wave at running back, wide receiver, tight end, who's most likely to push in? And if we had a quarterback fall, or you are in a league, maybe Pickett falls a little bit and then people don't want to draft him with the risk and with maybe lesser rushing upside than the other 4 guys, who's going to come in there and take some of these spots? Do we have a chance to have any wide receiver incursions into the top 5? Do we have a running back who could still blow people away and really surprise in terms of where he goes?
I've seen some people mention Trey McBride as a late round pick, if only because what he produced around other talent in college at the tight end position seems to be the first pick at that position. But also NFL evaluators, like recall Anthony Schwartz, Tutu Atwell, they genuinely, their brains shut down whenever someone runs a fast 40. They don't look at anything beyond that. Over the last decade, actually, 86% of wide receivers who clocked faster than a 4.5 40 have been drafted, which is incredible. That's all they look at is speed. And so even a player like, Tyquan Thornton or something, I think genuinely could pop up as a 3rd or 4th round pick, no matter what he did in college, just because every coach thinks they can use a wide back. Every coach thinks they can put a receiver in screens and that they're going to get 10 touches, explosive touches per game. And that's very clearly never the case. So I would also just say, make sure you look at speed, because that's kind of where we get an ADP edge at.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things is that you have the sort of draft slot anchoring that gives you a sense of what the overall range is. And then you can use a lot of the peripherals, a lot of the advanced stats to get an edge on that. The guys who run the fast 40s are so overdrafted that you actually need to move them down a good chunk in terms of the draft slot to get a feel for what their actual result is likely to be.
Did you enjoy that clip? Make sure you hit that subscribe button to get more content from RotoViz. And of course, you can check out full-length podcasts at rotoviz.com/podcast. Available on all podcast platforms. Check out our wide range of content. Once again, rotoviz.com/podcast.